Hello there, my name is Lee Carroll. I'm here today to give you a lecture about 2012. It's one in the series that we are preparing. Now some of you are way ahead of me because this 2012 program, if you want to say, which is entitled The Real Story About 2012, is perhaps in your mind a little late. After all, it's 2012. Now, some of you are saying, well, it's only going to be a few months and this particular information is all going to be out of date. I wonder, really, if it's out of date. If the things do not happen as you've been told in 2012, you might want to look at this again just to perhaps establish for your own reality what was said and what here I am teaching. I happen to believe that this particular lecture about 2012 is going to be valid and important for you to see long past 2012. So maybe you're even watching this in 2013. I certainly hope so. It means that I'm right and that we're still going to be here. So let us begin this particular 2012 message. This message I have been giving now for 2 years in various forms. Sometimes a short form, sometimes a long form. Well, I'm going to make this in between that, give you as many things as I can in the research that I have done and all of the things that I have been told by the various masters, the various shamans, and also those things told me by other channels, and then of course the academics. I want you to see it all. The story begins with a premise, and here's what I'm going to give you. 2012, the alignment that we are talking about, is not an esoteric prediction. It's astronomy. It is absolutely pure astronomy. Now you've been told, well, wait a minute, we haven't heard that. We have heard that there is Mayan prophecies and that there's ancient prophecies and things are going to happen and this is the date. Well, perhaps that's what you have heard, but all of these were based around astronomy. So let us start there because I want you to get a full picture of what the experience of 2012 is truly about. Now, if we're going to do this correctly, we're going to have to do it academically, and I don't want to make any mistakes. And so I want you to see the training that I have been given by those who know about astronomy. Believe me, it's not a subject that you're going to want to get into very deeply because it'll capture you and that's all you're ever going to do. It is so fascinating. I want to tell you about the 2012 Galactic Alignment. Now this is pure astronomy. And this is what I want to relate to you. It's something that I learned about astronomy. I didn't even know it until about 3 years before I started teaching the 2012 experience. And so it was new to me, and even some of the terminology was new to me. So if you're like me, some of these words won't make any sense, but I'm going to give you the academics of it, the definition of something called the 2012 Galactic Alignment. So here it is. The Galactic Alignment is the alignment of the December solstice sun with the Galactic Equator. This alignment occurs as a result of the precession of the equinoxes. See, now you know, right? When I first heard that, I said, what? I'm not really sure what an equinox is. It's something about equal times a year and precession? What in the world is that? So let's continue. Precession, well, it's a word that means the wobbling of the Earth. It is caused by the Earth wobbling so slowly on its axis that it shifts the position of these equinoxes and the solstices 1 degree every 71.5 years. Boy, that is really slow. It'll take the December solstice sun 36 years to precess through the galactic equator. I'm going to explain all this right now so that you understand. Let us start with the slowness of a wobble of the Earth. The Earth literally wobbles like this, just like that. If this is the North Pole, this South Pole goes like that. And in order for it to do one complete and full wobble and return to where it started the wobble, it takes, ready? 26,000 years. That is a long, long time. Some don't even believe humanity was around then. Of course it was, but I mean, that's a long, long time for the Earth to wobble and record it. And This is where I'm getting at, and you'll see. Now, the other thing I want to show you, I'm going to put it on the screen here so that you can see it very, very clearly and remember it. It'll take December solstice sun 36 years to precess through the galactic equator. What does that mean to you? Here's what I want to show you. The 2012 experience is not something that's going to happen on December 21, 2012. It has been happening for 18 years. So what I am saying is that what astronomers tell us, it's a 36-year event. It's not something that is a one-day event. Now, I just want to back up, maybe be a little silly with you for a moment, but there's a lot of people very, very frightened that something's going to happen in 2012. If they haven't heard any of this information, the first thing they're going to hear is that it's going to be December 1st, because after all, that's 2012, and they've heard all of these bad things about it, so they're afraid. Well, I will address you right now. If you're one of those, I will tell you this. It's not going to happen supposedly till 21 December 2012. Therefore, you have 12 more months to worry. And that'll make you feel much, much better. Now, for those of you who are worried about December 21, 2012, I have a solution. And here it is. Now, this is assuming, by the way, that you're in the northern hemisphere, or perhaps even the southern hemisphere, but a certain part of the earth, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. Let's pretend you're like me and you're in the United States. Well, I will give you some advice, and there is this. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. And then on December 20th, call Australia. Because Australia, it's tomorrow. And if they're still there, you can relax. And if they're not, then you only have a few hours to worry. Now, isn't that better? Isn't that better? It's a much better scenario, you know, for your heart. Of course, I'm being funny. I'm hoping that by the end of this particular training, you'll understand why I'm being a bit facetious. I'm not making fun of something very serious, because 2012 is extremely serious, but in a way, perhaps, you didn't expect. Let's look at some astronomy together, and it's fun. I told you this is infectious. When you start looking at astronomy, you're going to want to get a telescope. What I'm showing you on the screen right now is called M31. This is Andromeda, and it is a spiral galaxy. Now take a look at this, because this is a photograph. Isn't that beautiful? Now the reason I'm showing you this is because we also are a spiral galaxy, and our galaxy is called, of course, the Milky Way. Now here's an illustration on your screen I'd like you to see. And this particular illustration shows where we are in the spirals of the spiral galaxy. You can see that there's a Sagittarius arm, we're looking through it as we look toward the center of our galaxy. It's a very beautiful illustration. Now, let me just point out something. I hope that all of you looking at this today will realize that this is not a photograph. Please tell me you understand why this is not a photograph. I hope everybody here understands we have not been out this far. Regardless of what you see on science fiction, this had to be drawn. Here is the same kind of a thing, an illustration, but from the top down. Isn't this spectacular? It shows, again, our spiral galaxy called the Milky Way, and that's where our sun is. Now, I'm going to give you another photo. And this is a photo of another spiral galaxy that is close to us. And we're looking at it now from the edge on. This is much like ours. Can you see that almost all of the stars, like for instance 90%, are in the ring, I would say, that is called the Galactic Equator. Now, the center of the galaxy is pretty obvious. That's the big ball in the middle. And then the edge is where almost all of the stars are located. And that is, again, called the equator of the galaxy. From Earth, we're always looking into the edge of this equatorial plane. So we see it as a line in the sky, and we call it the Galactic Equator. We call it the Milky Way. It's very visible in a clear night sky. So let me give you an example of how this wobble has looked to the ancients, and what would happen if you had a camera mounted on a statue that might take a picture every year. So we're going to have a little pretend thing. Pretend this is a statue. Well, of course it is a statue. You don't have to pretend that. That happens to be Christopher Columbus. And what we're going to do is pretend for a moment that this particular statue has been around for 26,000 years. Obviously it hasn't, so please pretend with me. And what we're going to do with the statue is we're going to put a camera on his finger. Are you ready? Bang, there's the camera. Wasn't that clever? And the reason we're doing that is because this particular camera, in this metaphor, in this exercise, is going to take one photo of the night sky every year on the solstice, which is December 21, the northern hemisphere, for 26,000 years. So, one picture, one day, every 26,000 years. And because the Earth wobbles, every single picture, except for two, will be different. So now, follow this with me. You got the Earth wobbling like this. And so, of course, if you have a statue with a camera taking a picture of the same part of the sky, as the Earth wobbles, it's going to take a picture that's different. This was noticed. And it was noticed by, well, I'm going to show you, just about everybody, but of course, especially those who were targeting it for charting the stars, such as the Mayans were. And what I want to show you now is another example of why it is a 36-year event, according to the astronomers. So let's take a look at another photo. This is the Milky Way, as seen in an astronomy picture. It's a time exposure of the night sky. I want you to look at that for a moment. It's not exactly as we see it. If you've been out in the desert, especially, away from the city lights, and could see how the Milky Way just lights up, it's an amazing experience, and I tell everybody I know you should at least see it once. I think I saw it for the first time as a kid in the Grand Canyon, and it was just amazing to look at the sky, and especially a desert sky which doesn't have the clouds, and to see the clarity of this Milky Way. Well, it just happens to be that we see it without a photo aided picture, as this one is, just as a line of stars. But when you start opening it as a time exposure, you actually see that there's some dark stuff in there, and that is, I'm going to explain a little bit too, because that's matter. Those are what they call in astronomy clouds. And they actually have given it a name. I'm going to tell you what that name is in a moment because it relates to some of the predictions. This is our Milky Way. Now, let's take a look at the borders of that Milky Way. Let's say where it starts and where it ends, and how we would then squash it into a line if we had to make a drawing. So here are the lines for you to look at. Now, pretend with me, again, you have that statue and he's taken this picture. It's going to take 36 years. As he takes one picture a year, he's going to have 36 photos that'll get him through that galactic equator, in other words, through the Milky Way. And that's the point of this, is that the Earth is wobbling so slowly, that's how long it's going to take. However, the midpoint of those 36 years, in 18 years, is the 2012 solstice. So now we have December 21, and I'm showing it to you as that green line there. That's the middle of the event. So it's all about the Earth wobbling. So let's stop the lecture for a moment and talk about that. You got to understand, everything you've been told about space, about alignments, about suns whizzing in and whizzing out, about energy, of planets starting to align and do things, is incorrect. It's all about how we see the stars because we wobble. That's the whole extent of this. Now, do you understand that if you were on Mars, there would be no galactic alignment? There'd be no 2012 alignment because it is an Earth-based observation. It's only how we look at the sky because we wobble. So you have to take a deep breath, because if you've been told there's alignments coming and we're going to smash into this and we're having dust storms and all manner of things because of the alignment, that is simply not happening. And that's been made up to frighten you. There's a lot of stuff that's been made up to frighten you, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. So let us now move on to what you expect me to move to, and that is who discovered it. Who is it on Earth that has ever been here that discovered this alignment? Now, if I were to poll you right now as you watch this, you would say, well, that has to be the Mayan, because their calendar has all the predictions. And I'd say to you, really? And you think that they were the only ones? Because now I want to show you who discovered it. Well, there were the Egyptians, master astronomers, the Chinese, master astronomers, Mayans, Toltecs, Aztecs, Druids, Incas. I run out of space on my slides quickly. What we find out is that most of the ancients of the Earth knew about it. This means most of the ancients of the earth were very, very interested in the stars. If you start to study settlements of the ancients, you find they were interested in the sun. They were interested in the moon. They were interested in the shadows. They knew about the equinoxes and the solstices, just like the Mayan did, and they noticed that the earth wobbled. They couldn't help but notice. Even though they didn't have telescopes, there were ways of them being able to view the stars very carefully. I'm going to show you one of the observations of the Mayans and how they did it, and so that you can understand that they saw the wobble. Now, I have a question. I want to stop the lecture right now, because here is an esoteric puzzle for you. I've just told you that on the planet right now we have evidence from the writings of the ancients that they knew about this galactic movement. They knew about a galactic movement. Are you getting me here? This is our galaxy. They knew all about it. So let me ask you a question. If they knew about this in the ancient times, why is it in the 1400s that when we were then sailing from Spain or from Europe or from Portugal, we were afraid we were going to fall off the edge of the earth? In other words, we didn't even think the earth was round. Do you think that perhaps that we lost something? Why would this be? This is like ancient information, and we're afraid that we're going to fall off the edge of the earth? Did you know that Galileo was put under house arrest all of his life because he discovered with his telescopes that the earth goes around the sun? Now, he was put under house arrest, of course, by the church, because the church said, well, that's foolishness. Don't you see that we are the center of the universe? Absolutely. Can't you see at night it all goes around us? You see? Just take a look at the sky. It's ridiculous what you're saying. And so, of course, it was religious information, and he flew in the face of what they believed, so he was put under house arrest. So that is what we're looking at, is perhaps a confluence of evidence that shows us that we lost a lot. I want to tell you about a friend of mine named Greg Braden. Now, Greg Braden is a scientist. He's a spiritual man, but he's not necessarily a channeler or a psychic. He's a scientist, and that's what he does first and foremost. Greg also is one who has discovered spirituality in the science that he has researched. He has many books. One of my favorite is Fractal Time, where he starts to talk about these very things we are discussing. You know, it was Greg's idea, based upon his research, that fractal time, which I'm going to explain to you in a little minute, tells about decision points. These are points where civilization may have, in the past, actually terminated themselves or partially terminated themselves, or at least to the extent where we lost all of the knowledge and had to start over. That's profound. 4 times, according to Greg, potentially we did this. If you take a look at the evidence right now that I've just given you, that the ancients knew about galactic movement, and the 1400s we didn't even know the earth was round, you've got to start saying that is a real possibility, that we have lost it all and that we've started completely over. This is what I believe as well. Even in our major religions, taking a look at what they believe and some of the mythology that is presented and some of the other things that don't make any sense, it almost looks like we lost some spiritual truths along the way too, especially when you look at some of the ancient religions and some of the organized religions that actually had things that were far more advanced than what we're looking at now. So is this possible? I bring this to you just to show you that when we start talking about fractal time, 2012 is one of the decision points. Don't be frightened, because what I'm going to give you now is evidence that we are actually moving through this decision point in a way you might not have expected. Now, let's get to the next part of the training, if you want to call it training, because I would love to train you out of fear that 2012 is going to be a problem. Who made a calendar about it? And now you're going, I got this one. It's the Maya. You'd be right. They made a calendar about it. But also you should know, so did the Aztecs and so did the Toltecs. In fact, they used the very same observatories the Mayans did. One of the things that they were telling us when we went to Xochicalco, and I'll tell you about that in a moment, when you look at the Maya ruins and you take a look at their temples and their pyramids and you walk around their settlement, is that no one can really tell where the Aztecs and the Toltecs ended and the Mayans started. Because when one of those civilizations conquers another, and especially in Latin America, in Mexico, we've discovered that unlike in the Middle East where they destroy the enemy's sacred places, these guys just took a look at the pyramids and went, cool, let's just build some more onto them. So they all used each other's stuff, if you want to say that. And we find observatories that they all use. So why did the Mayans win this race, if you want to say? Because this is seemingly the calendar we use. And the answer is because they were better at publishing. And really, truly, they had a better concept of what to do with the calendars, how to put them out. And so they were very well known. So the Mayans won that particular battle, and those are the ones that we have today to take a look at. So there's a lot to tell you. And also, for those of you who are looking at this and going, say, well, Mr. Carroll, have you done the math? And do you know that their calendar was different? And they had a different month structure, and the math was different from our calendar today? Absolutely, yes, I do. And I'm skipping all of that because you can find that almost anywhere and see how it was interpolated and interpreted and how we get what we get. That's not where I'm going with this lesson. Where I'm going with is of the energy of 2012 and what you think might be happening and what we've discovered. So now I want to take you on a study. I have to do this carefully, but that is why perhaps you tuned into this today. I want to take you on a study that is fairly academic. I've got to do it right. You know, when you take a look at the Mayan calendar and you take a look at everything that has been said about it, there is this, what I call simple Simon attitude. Here's what the Mayans did. Here's what they said. Enough said. Close the door. Move on. And that is just so ridiculous. That's like somebody from space coming and visiting the United States. And they say, here's what they believed, here's who they are, shut the door and move on. And you go, wait a minute, we're a little more complex than that. You know, we've got several political parties, we've got a lot of religions, we believe a lot of things. And they go, no, we're just going to select one and fly away. And that's what it looks like when you study what others have said about here's what the Mayans say. By the way, especially those who are reporting on the History Channel. I'm not a fan. I'll just come right out and say that. Now, this is a public tape, and they're not going to like this, and I don't care, because what I have seen the History Channel give us is total and complete misinformation, and I want to hold them responsible, hold their feet to the fire, because I know things perhaps they don't want me to know. And I'll talk a little bit about that too. And so you're getting a whole lot of media telling you a lot of things that are incorrect just to frighten you. The Maya civilization was complex. It's as complex as any you would ever study. They were around a very long time, and they had a whole lot of beliefs. So I want you to follow this chart that I've just put on the screen. These are two columns. One is called Mayan Prophecies, and one is called the Mayan Calendar Attributes. So we're going to study these separately because not everything the Mayans did was calendar-based. They had multiple priests with multiple ideas. They had multiple spiritual followings, even within the clan that is Mayan, from temple to temple. This was a very, very complex civilization. But as I say, it's an ancient civilization. They had a long time on the planet. So one of the things they did was the calendar. That's one of the things they did. We're not going to talk about that yet. I want to go to the left column. Number one, let us talk about that which you have heard. Some have heard about the doom and gloom prophecies of the Maya. And these are the ones. They're called the Chilam Balam prophecies, sometimes called the jaguar priest prophecies. Now, I am only barely touching on a very complex subject. If you want more about this, there is a lot to be said. In fact, there's an academic named Jeff Stray, and I'm going to show you his picture in a little while, that I really feel has done just an amazing amount of research. And I point to him as an academic that if you want to find out a little more or a lot more about all of this, including the 2012, that you can read his books and see his YouTube interviews. So that's the name of the doom and gloom prophecies. Now, let's talk about the fact that they were lost or partially lost when the Spaniards invaded Latin America, basically Mexico and South America, that the Spaniards literally swept through, even partly of my house and where I live in California. They were seemingly everywhere. And what they did in their Christianity zeal was exactly what they were asked to do, and that was to destroy everything they found that was pagan. And that included all of the Mayan prophecies. And so what we end up with is partial stones and partial messages, and including what the Chilam, Balam, and Jaguar priest prophecies are. Now, what I want to show you is that we are not talking about the calendar prophecies at all. Not yet. We are talking about something completely and separately apart from the calendar. Now, what I want to show you is that these prophecies that were partially lost and then found, only shards of them were found, were based mostly in Mayan mythology and, are you ready, games they play. I want to show you something. Here is Xochicalco. You're looking down on it. This is a model of it on the left side, and on the right side, the actual settlement. I was there in 2008 and took these pictures. And I got to see things that most people don't get to see. There's numbers of reasons. I got to go into the observatories. I want to show you what was told to me, what the archaeologist said, what a gentleman said who has studied this and even been in the observatories. Here we are at Xochicalco, looking at the Mayan temple, but wait a minute. There is a field where they play games in every single Mayan settlement. Now, I'm showing you on the screen one that has a mounted hoop that has a very large circle where a ball has to go through it. That's part of the game. In the bottom, you're going to see a smaller hoop that's not mounted because it's fallen off. This is the one in Xochicalco, but look at the court where the game is played. It's huge, and on each side of that, before they crumbled, were seats for literally thousands to watch this game. Now, let me tell you what the game is about, because this is fun information. If you haven't heard this, this is based upon research. Believe me, I didn't make it up. You have priests with differing spiritual ideas. Imagine that. And here we are in a civilization where they didn't agree spiritually. And so you have one important priest guy who says this is going to happen, and another important priest guy says no, this is going to happen. And by the way, they're also talking to the calendar guys who are working on a whole other scenario, which we're going to talk about in a moment. So they're all picking up each other's ideas and they're arguing about it. So the king comes along and says, look, we've got to have a little more unity here. So we're going to play a game, and we're going to do it often to settle the issue of who is right. Again, I didn't make this up. And so what they did was they had Team A representing one priest and Team B representing the other priest. And they would play a game, and whichever team won, that would be the prophecy that they would claim and use. Now, in the game playing, it was very, let's say it's profound, because only one ball through that hoop was needed to win the game. Only one. And here's another interesting thing. If you do your research, you'll find this was one of the first games ever played in Latin America where they were not able to use their hands. Only feet, only their head. Yeah, it probably was the beginning of soccer, and it explains why the soccer champions are where they are on the earth, and many more things. They're very, very good at this game, and maybe, just maybe, the Mayans were the first to play it. But there's a little bit of a twist here and a little profundity, that the captain of the losing team was killed in the spot. So it gave them a little more push, I think, and perhaps a little bias in order to win for their guy. So we have games being played here that then set some of the prophecies that you've heard about. Now, let me stop the lecture and ask the question. Have I mentioned anything yet about the calendar? Nope. This is all about the mythology, all about the games they played, the shards that they discovered that they then claim have doom and gloom prophecies on them. And by the way, they do. Let me give you one. One of the pieces spoke of moving into darkness in 2012. Another one talked about 3 days of darkness we would have in 2012. I want to give you an idea. Maybe, just maybe, these were like Nostradamus quatrains, or like the verses in Revelation, where they are made as metaphors instead of literal. Do you realize every time we get prophecy from Scripture that's accurate or even non-accurate, it comes, and that's another lecture by the way, it comes in quatrains and in metaphoric ways. What if indeed that might be right, but in a metaphoric way? Let me show you how it might be. I'll put on the screen something else for you to see. This is again, it's another illustration of the galactic equator. But now I'm going to tell you what astronomers also call it. It's called the dark rift. That's the very thing we are moving through at the moment with the guy with the camera taking the picture. He's in the dark rift, or the galactic equator. He's moving through darkness. So very, very possibly they're right. And we are moving through darkness. What about the 3 days of darkness? Are you aware of the numbers that are used in the quatrains of Nostradamus in the old days, and also in Revelation, where numbers also mean decades or thousands or even millions of years? The earth being created in 7 days, of course, is a metaphor about something that is far longer than that. 3 days just happens to correspond with 3 decades, and we're looking at a 36-year event. It's possible. I just give you this so that you don't walk away and say, yeah, but what about those prophecies? I don't see how they can come true. That is one way that they can come true and not be harmful, and also be nothing that is negative. This is what the astronomers are calling, of course, the galactic equator, what you see is the Milky Way. In review, they call it the dark rift. Now, let's talk about the calendar. So now we're going to look at the chart again. Now we're on the right-hand side of the chart, and let's begin. First and foremost, number one, we have most of, if not all, of the versions of the calendars of the Maya. They were not lost. They're chiseled as glyphs on the walls of their pyramids, on the outside, where you can look at them, where archaeologists can interpret them, where you can read the Maya language, which is still very readable because the elders are still around. So, it's not a mystery. And so anybody who told you we lost half of them, we don't know what they're about, they're not telling you accurate things. Because, sure, Chilam, Balam, all of those mythologies, all of those things that the games and the things that the priest had to just, they're all in pieces, but not the calendars. So there is one mythology I wanted to take right to the edge of that and say, it's not true. No matter what you say, and the reason I can tell you that is going to show you I'm actually going to show you the glyphs in a moment, and you can see for yourself that they're in pretty good shape, okay? Number two, we now understand most of the esoteric studies of the Mayan calendar work. What in the world does that mean? We understand the esoteric studies of their work. It's important for you to know and understand this. We now understand that the calendar of the Maya was more than just an attempt to make a calendar that shows equinoxes and solstices. This had esoteric information all over it. These people were highly spiritual. They saw in the stars things like so many other civilizations did, that read into them certain kinds of things and recorded them, made predictions about them. They were no different than the Chinese and the Druids and the Toltecs. But what we are now discovering is that they were right. Because they were actually using something beyond esoterics. They might have had the formulas for what we now are seeing as fractal time. The Xochicalco glyphs reveal the time fractal predictions of the calendar. Now, let's go back to Greg Braden for a moment. I'm going to read you something. It is the synopsis, that is the promotional piece for Greg Braden's book, which I'm now going to show you on the screen. This is called Fractal Time. And here's what Greg says. Applying the new laws of fractals to the ancient waves of time, Greg proposes that everything from the way we age to our patterns of relationships and even the wars between nations are simply the returning waves of our past. As each wave returns, it carries a more powerful, amplified version of itself. Whoa. Do you realize what that means? That means that time has to be in a circle for this to be accurate. Absolutely. What are returning waves of our past if it's not a circle? Well, let's look at this for a moment, because this is one of the most confusing things I have ever tried to tell anybody about as long as I have been lecturing. Because we see time in a straight line. It always goes straight. It always features a beginning and an end. In fact, when you talk about the Big Bang, that has to be the beginning. Isn't it interesting, the bias we have? Everything we have has to have a start. It's like a string. It must have a start. The idea that it was always there doesn't compute in our reality, unless, of course, you're talking about God, and that's different, and that God can always be there, but not the universe. It had to have a beginning. Well, time is the same way. It had to have a beginning, but it never ends. Isn't that interesting? We can have something that goes forever, but it has to have a beginning. Do you realize that's a three-dimensional bias? And, by the way, it's incorrect. Have you ever wondered if time could move left or right or up or down? And you're going, wait a minute, now you've lost me. And that is the point. Because in 3 dimensions, we think in a 3D way, in a multi-dimensional space and a reality. Time is in a circle. In fact, time might not even exist. And yes, it can go left and right and up and down. Because there are multi-dimensions there, not just 3D. I want to show you something about time being in a circle and how time fractals might work. If you could imagine a railroad track that is time for a moment and you're on it. If you look at the railroad track and it goes all around the earth, suspend your belief for a moment. I know it can't go on water, but just be with me here. It goes all around the earth and you are on it. And let's say that you're a railroad car. Let us say that you're going slowly, and let us say that your life lasts, several hundred miles. And then what happens after that, of course, is you pass on and you come back. Oops, I just lost some of you. Yes, you have to believe in past lives to go with me on this one, at least for this example, okay? So let us say you're on this railroad car and you're going for a couple of hundred miles, you pass away, and you come back and you come back and you come back. You can see yourself slowly moving around the earth on this track of time, but it's in a circle. Now you never know that, because as you look at that track, it goes right into the distance. And you think it's a straight line going forever in one line, but it's not. It's going actually around the globe. And as you come around the globe, eventually you'll start covering the tracks that you did at one time. And if you look at that track and you look down at it, the question I would ask you is it the past or is it the future? And you would have to say, well, since I tread it once, it has to be both. Now picture for a moment that on that circle there are attributes that can be computed, like for instance a mountain to climb. Suddenly you've got a mountain to climb in a place that was predicted because the math supported it. I said the math. In other words, this is becoming now something that is scientific. If you read Greg Braden's Fractal Time book, you can even go on the internet using his computations and see what certain years might bring based upon the math. And you might say, well, I don't really believe this. This is getting just too spooky. Is there any physics that you can give me that is not a Greg Braden book? Okay, take a look at this slide. Here is a quote by Kryon. Time is in a circle. So what happens in the future always affects the past. Now, take a look at this. In November 17, 2010, USA Today reports that my President Obama gave a gentleman the Medal of Honor for Science. And let me tell you what this man said. This guy's name is Aronoff, and he's an Israeli. Listen to what this physicist has proven. He appears to show that actions in the future can alter measurements made in the past. Is that spooky or what? But here we are with mainstream physics saying, yeah, it appears that time might actually be in a circle. Now, are you starting to understand how the Mayans might very well have been able to create a calendar using their intuition, that which they had discovered, and perhaps math, that would lead them to be able to say, here are some energies that you're going to experience in the future. That's what was going on. Let me take you to Xochicalco. I've got some pictures, and here they are. One of them you'll see is a glyph, very pristine, is it not? Does that look like that was partially destroyed? It was not. I am there with a gentleman named Jorge Baez. And Jorge is an engineer by trade, but he also is extremely interested in these ruins. And he is well received at this Mayan settlement. And he has been able to actually study it in a way that nobody else has been able to study it. They allow him in the observatories to try to duplicate what the Mayans have seen. I'm going to show you his setup in a moment. But let's go to the walls of the pyramid. And I told you I would go there. For you to see something I want you to see. Here it is. Who is that guy standing in front of that wall? Well, his name is Robert Coxon, and he is the maestro, the composer, and the musician that is often with the Kryon team when we go overseas, even some of the times when we're in North America. Now, why is he standing in front of this wall? Because in 2008, I had no idea I would be teaching this. Therefore, every single picture that I took that was important had Robert Coxon standing in front of it. I was the commensurate tourist, and he was my friend, so there he is. So I want to show you something. Look beyond Robert and to the wall. And on the wall, what do you see? Well, you don't see much unless I highlight it for you, so I'm going to do that, okay? There's a highlight. Wow, looks like a snake, doesn't it? Goes up and goes down, goes up again. All right, I'm going to tell you what that represents. Right from the archaeologist himself, right from the engineer, right from the ones who can read around it and know Maya, this is what they say. This is the prediction of the potential of human consciousness from year to year. And the wall is there showing it. Now, by the way, does the wall look to you like it was destroyed or partially destroyed by the Spaniards? It was not. Clear as a bell. You can read it. So let me just take that illustration away and put it back a couple of times so that you can see what I'm talking about. You see the sweep up and the sweep down? It's all through their work. This is what they're talking about when it comes to predictions of human consciousness. So it would be a nice time for me now to read you what it says, because we've reached that point now. I've showed you the glyphs. I've told you what they were working on. I've told you about fractal time. Let me reveal to you what it says. And it's not that difficult to read, and you don't have to interpret it. This is what it says. It says that 2012 is going to be the highest potential consciousness that Earth has ever seen. Now, did the History Channel tell you that? They did not. Now, I had two friends who were interviewed for the Nostradamus special on the History Channel. They took them and spent a lot of effort with them, spent hours on camera with them. One of them was Greg Braden. Another one was named John Peterson, who is a futurist. Both of these gentlemen are renowned in what they do and what they know. That's why they were selected by the History Channel. I got an email from John who said, "Watch me tomorrow, I'm on the History Channel." I watched, and he wasn't. I got an email the next day from John who said, I wasn't on the channel. In other words, it shocked him that he wasn't there. Greg Braden didn't make it either. You have two men, highly knowledgeable about what it's really about, and neither were used. You see what this might mean? You're receiving biased information. That's not all. I've got another one for you to show you before this lesson is over that is absolutely blatantly being misrepresented totally in order to scare you. So here again, you see what is truly going on in the media, and that is why I'm doing this. I hope this survives past 2012, as I said originally, so that you can tune in and perhaps see some things you missed that will be even more current past 2012 than they are now. One of the things that Jorge Baez was able to do was to duplicate the Mayans' work. They let him into the observatories. Here is an illustration of what it looks like when the sun comes through a hole about 100 feet up, and through a series of disks and holes it is focused, therefore, onto a table or a platform that the Mayans might have had. Here's an illustration of Jorge actually at the table doing his studies in the Mayan observatories, trying to see what they saw, so he could remark as an engineer and as an archaeologist that he is about the study that they had. In other words, how precise was it? Now, I'm continuing to show you his work and what he's done, and this now goes to the cover of his book and something on the left-hand side that I want you to look at for a moment. He's written a book called The Secret of 2012, The Vital Energy of Movement, and this left-hand side illustration is actually a calculator. And it is not hard to describe because he's taken the Mayan Prophecies and put it on one circle of this concentric circle calculator, and he's put actually what happened on Earth and the history on the other one. So we can take a look and see, were the Mayans correct? And what it shows is that they absolutely line up. In other words, when the Mayans said that there was going to be a high energy, we had our Renaissance. When they said we would have low energy, we had our plagues, we had our wars. So here we are with information that the Mayans were onto something. They were pretty good. Now, I don't want to just stop here and say, well, isn't that lovely, and I've shown you some things, and we're going to have high consciousness. I'm going to take it further. I want to give you some information because I want to show you the research has been done. I want to ask a Mayan elder, are we doomed? Is there going to be a problem? Is there going to be an earth termination? What's going to happen? After all, you're an elder, and you are the one who is probably the descendant of those who wrote it. And here's what they have to say. Here's an article that says, 2012 is not the end of the world, Mayans insist. Listen to this quote. Most archaeologists, astronomers, and Maya say that the only thing likely to hit Earth is a shower of New Age philosophy, thanks a lot, ignorant astronomy, internet doomsday rumors, and TV specials which mix up Nostradamus' predictions with the Mayan predictions. Hey, I like you guys because you don't believe the History Channel's accurate either. See, now you got the Mayans on board. I like that part of it. Even though I didn't like the New Age part, I like the Mayan part. Okay, what about mainstream scholars? I gave you a name. I'm going to show you a face. His name is Jeff Stray. Jeff has been studying the meaning of the year 2012 since 1982. Around 96, he started to compile information into a booklet called Beyond 2012. He now has a second book, 2012 in Your Pocket. These are available, by the way, in English on the internet. Since then, another of his books, Diagnostic 2012, has become known as the most comprehensive database available today on 2012. You want to know this guy, don't you? I mean, if there's going to be an answer, it's going to be in his pocket. He has gathered information from every corner of the globe and has spoken in many countries. Wow, since 1982, I've only been doing this a few years. I want to know what Jeff knows. I want to ask this scholar. Now you realize Jeff may never ever watch this video because Jeff probably would never have gone to a Kryon site because Jeff is not necessarily interested in the things that you might be. But he is an academic and he has done his homework. So let's forget the esoteric, let's forget the channeler guy that's in front of you and take a look at what he says about everything 2012. This is a direct quote from YouTube, from an interview with Jeff Stray. And here's what he says. It may be the expansion of our perception into another realm, a new level of consciousness, a paradigm shift. Whoa. Here we are again. Does that sound like what the History Channel gave you? No. Does it sound like anything anybody has given you? And the answer is no. There's too much money to be made with doom and gloom, guys. This is what is going on. I want you to see the truth. I want to give it to you academically, esoterically. I want to take you to the Mayans. I want to show you all these things that I've already done in order for you to start getting the picture. What if it was just the opposite? What if 2012 is a revelation of consciousness higher than we have ever seen before? And if it is, my friends, it coordinates with the prophecy of Kryon in 1989, when he came in and gave me the information, there's going to be a consciousness shift of Earth. That's why I'm here. Get ready. That is the information. It's all about this alignment. It's why I'm standing here today doing this video for you. Now, in conclusion, just a couple more things I want to show you. The end of the Mayan calendar. When are you told it is? Well, I've been saying today, 21 December 2012. Okay, let's say it is. Why did they end it? Why did the calendar stop? You know, I'm hearing this, and I also heard it on Discovery and History Channel, by the way, both of them, that the Mayan calendar ends there. And they said, well, what's going to happen? Obviously, it's the end of time. That's their prophecy. No, it isn't. They never said it was the end of time. And you should know this, their calendar did not end at 2012. Do your homework. Don't just trust me here on this video, on this weird site that's channeling, you know. I want you to go find it for yourself. I want to tell you what the scholars are saying. The Mayans actually gave many predictions past 2012. In some of the research that I have found, that they actually say that there are pieces and parts of the Mayan calendar out to the year 4000 on the shelf ready to publish. So it was in their own calendar language too, just exactly like all of the other calendars. These are Mayan relics and artifacts out to 4000. Many scholars believe they were not through it all, but everything stopped when they moved away from their long-established observations, probably due to famine. In my seminars, I often talk about what NASA has discovered. They have actually analyzed some of the Mayan ruins from space and could see from the topography and all of their instruments what they might have gone through. And they see that they had a famine and that there was no rain and no food, and it probably was the end of their civilization, but not their calendar. Not at all. So what are you going to do with this information? I probably have just spoiled some of the fear, have I not? Now, in summary, here's what I want to tell you. There's not going to be any doom and gloom. That's my prediction. That's Kryon's prediction. That's the Mayans' prediction. That's Jeff Stray's prediction. You're going to see it everywhere. It's etched on the glyphs on the very temples of the Maya. Why should you be afraid when mainstream media wants to take it to the bank? Why would you be afraid? I want you to know the truth of all of these things. You know, Kryon said we were headed for shift and change, and this is all part of it. I participated in a very special event in 2011. I want to tell you about it. It was in Argentina. We went on a boat ride on a river in Rosario, and we celebrated this day, 11, 11, 11, 3 11s in a row, and Kryon channeled. And he said, you have just passed the marker. And the marker is that you have made it. And this decision point that is coming up right now, that always for years and decades had the promise perhaps of an Armageddon and a nuclear war, would now not happen that way. Instead, you are headed to something which is positive, but it requires change. Right now, as I talk to you, the United States is in a recession, a deep one, a big one. We still haven't figured our way out of it. But for the first time, we have started to play with big money. That is to say, we are angry about what we would call integrity issues in the stock market, in banking, and all of these things that never made sense before, all about greed. It's the first time, I think, we have ever challenged big money as a society. That is why we're in a recession. I think we're going to come out of it. That's also the prediction of Kryon. It's like pruning a plant, you know? When you prune it, it looks awful. If you ever done it to a tree, you think the tree is dead, and then the next season, the blossoms are even bigger than they were before. This is the message. And again, I'll say this, and often I say this in every single lesson I give. I've been called the Pollyanna channel. In other words, the news is too good. I want to tune into something a little more dramatic. Well, go do it, if you really want to. But I have a message that we are going to plant the seeds of peace on earth. And you know what? This is not just my message, because it's come directly from the Maya. This is their prediction as well. We are deep into it. If you're watching this in 2012, congratulations. If you're watching it past 2012, then you know I'm absolutely right, and we did not terminate. Perhaps you'll want to watch it again and see why. I'll bring you some more information about some other subjects and some other lectures. I hope you've had fun. I did. Thank you.